Hello, Dr. Moshe Terdiman. How are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm very fine. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
How is the climate there? Is it cold?
Yeah, the climate is cold and getting colder for the next week, but it changes. Usually now it's a warm winter here.
Yeah. And that is what we are discussing today. It is all about environment
Yes,
and
environmental,
its
let's
impact.
say, challenges for
And
the
its
region.
impact. Yeah, for my region, not your region only.
Yeah, for, I
Yeah.
mean, South Asia, the Arab world, the
Yeah.
Muslim world, yes,
Yeah.
everyone.
So, Dr.
Africa.
Moshe, I would request you first of all to introduce a little about you and your academic background that people who are watching us, listening us right now, they will know a little about you.
Well, I'm really a Middle Eastern studies scholar, and I started with research of the Middle East and Islam in Africa, and then I moved through what happened in Darfur to the genocide there and the environmental factors causing it. I moved to really research environmental issues in the region. I mean, in the Arab Muslim world, in Africa, and because I felt that this is the issue of the 21st century that must be researched. So today, and also I'm an expert on the Red Sea Basin. Um, and nowadays, I'm working also, I'm affiliated with the Forum for Regional Thinking and also with the University of Haifa and at Ezri Center there for Gulf Country Studies. And I'm also directing and founding the Research Institute for Islam and Muslims in Africa and the Institute for Environmental Security and Wellbeing Studies. So I'm affiliated with all those places.
A lot of work you are doing, doctor.
Yes, I'm trying. Being busy in what you love to do is the best thing.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Educate me and enlighten me about the environmental challenges. Like this topic, this is my very first interaction with an expert on environmental challenges and its impacts because I never got a chance to speak on environmental issues. I have just a raw information, a little bit about, yeah, the climate is changing, the environment is changing, challenges are there, but we actually don't know the real challenges. So please let us know how this environmental change, the climate change, is going to impact us in future or right now impact having an impact on us.
So I will start with the present, with your permission.
Yeah, please.
So first of all, I will divide it into two themes. One is the Middle East and North Africa, and the other is the larger Muslim world, including Africa and South Asia, and also Indonesia and other places as well. So if we begin with the Middle East is really a outpost, a hotspot in
Mm,
climate change, meaning the temperature in the Middle East is growing in about 1.5 degrees Celsius in
mm,
the last few decades, which is much more than most of the world, or, or double of most of the world. So this is really one of the hottest places.
Hmm.
And but the Middle East and North Africa have also certain geographical preconditions that climate change only exacerbates the situation there.
Hmm.
And the preconditions are, first of all, and this includes also Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India,
Hmm.
all those countries and some of Africa also is located in what geographers call the desert belt,
Hmm.
which is really full of deserts all over. Which means, first of all, there is not enough water.
Hmm.
So we are speaking already about a problem, which is water scarcity.
Hmm.
Another issue which it involves is that there is not enough fertile land,
Hmm.
meaning only 11% of the whole area of the
Hmm.
Middle East and North Africa is fertile.
Okay.
And much of it is really lost for desertification processes and exacerbated by climate change. So what we are seeing is that most countries are dependent on other countries for food.
Hmm.
This means that there is no food security.
Yeah.
And the countries which are not really dependent on food on others, like, for example, Pakistan or India, they're using so much of their waters in
Hmm.
irrigation, and most of those waters are coming from groundwater resources,
Yeah.
that it really depletes the drinking water for people.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
And therefore, what we have, the situation we have is that because of mismanagement of water resources, not
Hmm.
because of climate change, but
Hmm.
because of mismanagement, we are having a lot of problems that climate change only exacerbates.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, another issue is energy security, because as we know, oil, gas are going to
Yeah.
deplete at some point.
Hmm.
So countries in the region, like the UAE, for example, or Saudi Arabia, are really starting to prepare for the day after,
Hmm.
and therefore to develop renewable energies.
Hmm.
Now, Saudi Arabia, as for example, like Singapore and other places, are also having, an Arctic policy,
Hmm.
and this is because the Arctic Ocean is melting,
Hmm.
and therefore the transnational sea lanes are now starting to go through the Arctic and really shorten the way from the Far East to Europe and the West in
Hmm.
about 2 weeks or more
Hmm.
from when it went through the Red Sea, when it is going from
Hmm.
the Red Sea. So this is another challenge that the countries need to deal with. So
Yeah.
energy security is also something that to take into account.
Hmm.
Now, the other two issues, problematic issues or challenging issues that all the region faces is really desertification, because the deserts are spreading,
Yeah.
and land degradation, because again, also of desertification and also because of mismanagement.
Hmm.
And therefore, we have a lot of issues here. Another thing that combines with it is huge population growth. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, all over the Middle East, North Africa, Africa, and South Asia, a huge population growth
We
that
have a
really,
very small population, Dr. Moshe.
Sorry?
Just we have very small population.
Very,
Just
very small.
220, 220 people
Yeah,
in
yeah.
millions.
Yes, and your neighbor India have more than a billion.
Yeah. And on the upper side, more than a billion in China.
Yeah, in Bangladesh.
Yeah. So we are sitting in the region where around 3 billion people are living only in
Right,
Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, and China. More than 3
exactly,
billion.
exactly. And you all need to use the waters of, first of all, the groundwater,
Yeah.
which are depleting now very quickly,
Yeah.
and also the water from what is called the third pole, which are the Himalayas mountain.
Yeah.
And also this water is depleting because the snow
Hmm.
is melting very fast
Hmm.
because of climate change,
Hmm.
and also the glaciers. And what we have is a situation where, just 2 years ago, it was
Hmm.
forecasted that Pakistan will not have water in 2025.
Yeah.
So we are in this situation where 11 mega cities in India
Hmm.
are supposed to be without water also soon. And that Pakistan is also be out of water, and also Afghanistan, it's the same way, Kabul especially, but also other places in Afghanistan that are close to the Himalaya, and the fields are irrigated from those waters.
Hmm.
And it's a very challenging situation. Now, for example, India started to dam
Hmm.
some rivers that are going into the Indus and Brahmaputra.
Hmm.
That it wasn't supposed to do so, but it started just in the last year.
Yeah.
So it creates a lot of tension, all this situation, and also not only in South Asia, also, for example, if you take Turkey and the
Yeah.
Tigris and Euphrates,
Hmm.
you will see that now Turkey, Istanbul, is suffering from lack of water.
Yeah. That is true.
Turkey has seen a lot of water in it. I mean, in the
Hmm.
80s, in the 90s, but
Hmm.
because of a lot of consequent years of drought and climate
Hmm.
change and warming,
Hmm.
those waters depleted.
Hmm.
So now they want to use those waters for themselves. And now
Hmm.
the Tigris and the Euphrates are international waters,
Hmm.
rivers, or transboundary rivers. And
Hmm.
therefore, part of them is also Syria and Iraq.
Hmm.
And Turkey, when it wanted, for example, at the end of the 1980s, it really stopped the flow of the water to Syria because Syria supported the Kurds in Turkey.
Hmm.
So water can also serve as a weapon.
Yeah.
And Turkey really wants to develop its southwest and southeast periphery in Anatolia, where the
Hmm.
Tigris goes into Syria and the Euphrates go into Syria.
Hmm.
And therefore, they want to invest most of those waters there. Now,
Hmm.
also in the Nile, we have the same issue with Ethiopia, who is
Yeah.
now building a dam in the Renaissance Dam on the Blue Nile.
Hmm.
And Egypt says it will deplete 10% of its waters.
Hmm.
So therefore, it starts to to arrange itself towards this calamity. And
Hmm.
this is the real calamity for it because again, Egypt has now more than 100 million people.
Yeah.
So when the population grows And when you are really competing with others on dwindling resources, you have two options: or to collaborate, or to three options: or to manage solutions by yourself,
Hmm.
or to have a conflict.
Yeah.
So this situation can serve as a resource for peace or and
Hmm.
collaboration, or as a source of conflict, as the decision makers of all the countries in the region will decide.
Hmm. That's true. That's true. And Dr. Moshe, tell me one thing about it. Uh, Out of the whole uh, talk you have given us about the climate change and the issues and impacts of climate change, when we talk about the groundwater level, are the dams helpful to contain it or counterproductive?
Only for the short term. And that's why also in Pakistan you build a lot of dams. And also in India there are a lot of dams in order to store the water.
Hmm.
But again, it's depleting because if there is climate change, and for example, if we speak about Pakistan and we take Balochistan, for example, it's desert.
Yeah.
So if, for example, you build dams there
Hmm.
in the desert, then the water evaporates.
Okay.
So, so it all depletes. So it's
Hmm.
really for the short term, yes, it's a solution. But for the long term, maybe you need to build desalination plants as the Arabs are doing.
Hmm.
I mean, Egypt is doing it, the Gulf countries are doing it, others are doing it in
Hmm.
order really to deal with, again, it needs a lot of money. Poor countries cannot really afford it.
Hmm.
But still, it's a solution.
Hmm. So
Or to
for the short
manage
term,
water
dams
better.
are solution, right? If I'm understanding you rightly,
The dam is a solution for the short term,
for the
but
short term.
again, the population is growing.
Hmm.
And as long as it continues to grow, and as long, I mean, in these dimensions,
Hmm.
you cannot avoid the problem. You will just delay the problem, but you will not avoid it. So
But
you
at
will need
least
to
you,
deal in this stage or another.
yeah, but if you have the commitment to resolve the problem in longer term, so the dams are a solution for shorter terms to execute you the strategy for longer terms. It will give you time and space to execute the strategy for
Yeah.
longer terms. Yeah.
Yes, in condition that they are really dealing with it, because there are
Mm.
always issues that are more paramount than environmental issues.
Yeah.
The problem with environmental issues is that you cannot see them most of the
Mm.
time. They are very slow. I mean, they are very slow processes
Mm.
that are taking place, and then
Mm.
when they impact big.
Mm.
But in order to deal with them, you need it to be more clarified. Like, for
Mm.
example, you have natural disasters like floods, like
Yeah.
then you need to deal, so you deal.
Yeah.
But with issues, like water, energy, all this, although it is, you cannot sustain the people and the country without dealing with those issues, really.
Yeah. You cannot live with the denial zone living. You cannot deny
Right,
the challenges.
right.
Mm.
Because people just cannot survive
Yeah.
without water, without energy. Businesses
Mm.
cannot work.
Mm.
So, in order really to safeguard those issues, you have to have a strategy. You have to take into account while you are dealing with the strategy or managing it. You have to take into account the tradition of the people,
Mm.
the culture of the people, that it will fit them.
Mm.
You need, for example, to create alternatives.
Hmm.
You need, alternatives that are cheap or at least not as expensive as the other ones that are being
Hmm.
used now.
Yeah.
So you need to really develop a strategy. And there I want really to give an example of a country that did it in the energy sector, Morocco.
Hmm.
Morocco is really is a country that now shifted to about 40% this year, 40% of energy, renewable energy.
That's great.
From nothing only 7 or 8 years ago.
Wow. Amazingly great.
Yes, and this really, and this was because they really changed everything from policy, from
Hmm.
legislation,
Hmm.
all those issues. They
Hmm.
really managed it well,
Hmm.
and now they are going really to, they are the first country in Africa, in the Arab world, in the Muslim world, that is really shifting big to renewable energy
Hmm.
because of having a strategy
Hmm.
and also collaborating with the private sector and the public.
Hmm.
So they really made the first, really, it was 2011, the first, public
Hmm.
legislation about climate change and
Hmm.
sustainable development.
Hmm.
And therefore, when they had the public consent,
Hmm.
it was easier for them to really be active on this.
That's right.
So I think most countries, including Israel, including Pakistan, should
Hmm.
follow this model and really
Hmm.
develop strategy.
That's right. That's right.
First of
Dr.
all,
Moshe, we have a problem in Pakistan for a long time right now. There is a capacity to build a dam, which is an ideal situation for making a dam with less cost, with high efficiency. The project name is Kalabagh Dam, and that was proposed in 50s, 60s somewhere. But still, there is political rift, which is not taking this project to become a reality. And I guess without that, without, as you said, without the shorter solutions, short time solutions, we cannot reach the long term solutions. I guess this is right time to build some reservoirs for water for short term, and then try to shift your needs to meet up with the long term challenges.
yes, and this process, by the way, I think, from my point of view, it should be, top down and down up.
Hmm.
It should be in parallel,
Hmm.
coming from below and coming from up,
Yeah,
and then meeting in the middle with
that's right.
some compromise.
That's right. And tell me, Dr. Moshe, you talked about the food security. As I know, Israel was a country without water, without crops production 40 years back, 50 years back, 60 years back, all desert with less water resources. And today you are self sufficient in your food production, and you are dealing with the food security issues with high competence. How you achieved it?
Uh, Again, we had the challenge, the country Israel, when it started. After it was founded in
Hmm.
48, had a lot of challenges in front of it. And one of the visions of David Ben Gurion, which was the first prime minister of Israel, was to really relieve the Negev, relieve
Hmm.
the desert.
Hmm.
Now, desert is comprising 60% of Israel's area.
Oh my goodness. It is 60%, right?
60%, yes.
Mm.
We are also in, the desert belt, as all
Yeah.
the region.
Yeah.
And therefore, we found ways in order really to make it work. We found ways for a lot of innovation
Mm.
to really deal with those issues. And now Israel is a superpower in the issues of really food,
Mm.
of water management,
Mm.
of dealing with desertification.
Mm.
Israel is really a power that can share its know-how with others.
Mm.
Now it really does it secretly and non-secretly with other countries, also in the Arab world, also in the Muslim world. And again, but when you have public relationship, meaning when you have normalization,
Mm.
it's much easier to do so.
Mm.
And now also the UAE, Sudan, part of what we help Sudan now with is the issue of water and agriculture,
Mm.
because there were a lot of floods
Mm.
in Sudan, historic floods, which
Mm.
really flooded about one third of all its agricultural fields.
Mm.
And now Sudan has been known for a long time as the breadbasket of the Middle East
Mm.
and of the Nile Basin.
Mm.
So when all and many Gulf countries also are leasing agricultural lands there. So when all of it was flooded,
Yeah.
Sudan really, and agriculture is one of the main incomes of Sudan.
Mm.
Sudan really needs aid.
Mm.
So part of the agreement with Israel is that Israel will give Sudan first and foremost aid in really agriculture and water management and all those issues that Israel is excelling at.
Mm. That's right. And Dr. Moshe, you talked about the water resources, the usage of water resources as weapon. You have gone through that, right? The Golan Heights conflict involves the water resources as well, I guess.
I
We are
mean, the
facing it.
first, the first conflict on water was really between Israel and its Arab neighbors in '67, and even
Oh.
before that, because the Syrians were trying to divert the water of the Jordan River and its
Hmm.
sources, um, and Israel really opposed that. And
Hmm.
therefore, it went into, there were some clashes during the '60s, which came to their apex at the 1967 war,
Hmm.
then the conquest of the Golan Heights,
Hmm.
but and the Kinneret as well. So this was one of the factors. And but from then on, we are seeing that right now, for example, Egypt
Hmm.
always threatened to go to war if someone will take the water of the Nile from it.
Hmm.
That was what President Sadat said at the '70s. But now Assisi doesn't seem like he's going to war, and he will not go to war over it.
Hmm.
So he tries to manage by
Hmm.
himself, and
Hmm.
through the aid of others, Arab countries, Europeans, US, others, Russians, he tries
Hmm.
really to mitigate the issue.
Hmm.
But but again, we have all this all over. You have it also in India, Pakistan.
Yeah.
You have it
Yeah.
you have it in Pakistan, Afghanistan.
Yeah. Yeah.
All the issue with transboundary waters.
Yeah.
You have it between Afghanistan and Iran,
Yeah. And China and India.
and China and India, and also the Mekong River and all Southeast Asia. I mean,
Yeah.
you have it everywhere now
Yeah.
because of climate change and the problem that all the countries are now there. There is when you use transboundary waters, there are two principles, main principles. One is historical rights,
Yeah.
which means, for example, Egypt. Yeah, the Nile is the gift of Egypt,
Hmm.
the gift of life of Egypt. Without the Nile, Egypt doesn't survive.
Hmm.
So now the Nile is under threat because of the for Egypt, because of the Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia.
Hmm.
So, so it's the issue of historical rights of
Hmm.
Egypt on the water
Hmm.
versus the demand of use of others, other participatories in the river,
Hmm.
who say, all right, we have a population growth. We
Hmm.
need really to give the population what it needs in matters of development and water. And water is also used for energy uses
Hmm.
too, to create, I mean, electricity from
Hmm.
hydroelectric power and to give the population all this. And
Hmm.
so we need it too now. You cannot have it all for yourself.
That's right.
And in Egypt, there are no running water. I mean,
Hmm.
no running rivers.
Hmm.
So the only source of water is the Nile and some other groundwater that is elsewhere in the Libyan desert,
Hmm.
in the Western desert. But other than that, they have not so much water.
Hmm.
And in the Sinai, you have ISIS.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's not really, you know, a productive situation.
That's right. That's right.
In Iraq, the same. I mean, the first time in this decade, I mean, in the last decade, uh,
Hmm.
the Euphrates dried out. So in
Hmm.
Baghdad, they walked, I mean,
Hmm.
in the river.
Hmm.
So those things are really calamities at the end of the day. Can develop into calamities that can really
Yeah.
bring all countries down, and therefore environmental security. At least the Arab states understand that environmental security is really the secure. First of all, a guarantee for the stability of the regimes.
Hmm.
Because without environmental security, I mean, without dealing with the environmental challenges I mentioned before, you cannot really
Hmm.
survive in power. We saw it with Omar al-Bashir in Sudan.
That's right.
Because of the rise of electricity and food
Yeah.
prices,
Yeah.
there were all those demonstrations and then his
Yeah.
downfall. Now, we
That's right.
saw it also in the Arab Spring in Egypt with Mubarak. We saw
Yeah.
it in Syria. We saw it
Yep.
in Yemen. So
Yes.
it can develop to those kinds of things that can create chaos and civil war and the genocide in Darfur and other
Hmm.
things. And also can really make terrorist organizations who use those
Hmm.
resources and control the access to those resources
Hmm.
also function.
Hmm.
I mean, so it's really something much bigger than we think on the
Yeah.
surface.
It's a bigger challenge. And
Yeah,
it's a hidden challenge. It doesn't appear like a monster on the surface, but it is a big, huge monster, in fact.
yes, and therefore, in my point of view, it needs to have a regional
Hmm.
collaboration in dealing with
Yeah.
it because environmental issues like you have a pollution river,
Hmm.
like the Indus, let's say,
Yeah.
is polluted.
Hmm.
Then what will you do? Pakistan is at the end of the
Hmm.
Indus.
Hmm.
I
Pakistan is at
mean,
the end of the Indus. Yes, you're right.
so what will happen then? You will use polluted water. So
Yeah,
if you don't have the right facilities to turn them into clean waters,
yeah.
then what can you do with it? I mean,
It's waste.
exactly. So it's another deficiency.
Yeah, that's right.
So pollution is a problem that is really, crossing borders.
Hmm.
And
That's right.
therefore, you have to deal with it regionally,
Yeah,
and you cannot deal with certain issues just in the country level. I mean, you can manage, but you cannot solve the problem when it
that's right.
comes from a neighboring country.
That's right. That's right. And Dr. Moshe, I would like to ask you about desertification. The like you are from a country which had 60% of desert, right?
Yes.
And there are countries which are turning to be the 60% of the desert now because water is not there, groundwater is going down, the level is going down, down, and down. So the desertification is taking place. So how you face that challenge of desertification or already having 60% of your land it was desert, and now you are growing crops in desert w- with lesser water resources. How you faced and came over on this challenge, by the way?
Well, what we did is first of all we created what is called the all this conduit that guides the water from the Kinneret, which is in the Lake Kinneret, which is in the north of Israel, to the south. And then we brought water to the south.
Okay.
And it enabled Israel really to grow a lot of, a lot of crops in the western, in the southwest of the country.
Hmm.
While in the border with Jordan, we have a lot of other agriculture being done, and also we developed there a lot of renewable energy sources.
Hmm.
I mean, you need to take into account that Israel is a very dense place, meaning a lot of its area is desert, as I said,
Hmm.
60%.
Hmm.
And another part of its area is used by the army.
Hmm.
So therefore, most of the population, you don't have a lot of open spaces.
Hmm.
So it's even more challenging than I said before. The
Hmm.
picture is even more challenging.
Hmm.
And but still, we are a country that we have to survive. I mean,
Hmm.
when it was founded, it was engulfed with enemies,
Hmm.
so it had to survive somehow.
Hmm.
And in order to survive, you have innovation skills.
Hmm.
And if you don't have, you develop innovation skills
Hmm.
so that you can survive.
Hmm.
So that's what we did. And this now know-how, all this know-how, we are, spreading all over the world
Hmm.
with the work of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with the work of, businesses and companies and
Hmm.
others. And but Israel is one. If you take all what I said now into account, Israel is one of the densest countries in the Western world because most of the country is really concentrated in what we call the Tel Aviv area, which
Hmm.
is and the rest of the population is in the periphery, but most of the population is in the Tel Aviv area, and therefore you have really a lot more challenges to deal with.
That's right. That's very true. Well, thank you, Dr. Moshe, for being with us. And this is the first part of our series of talks about environment with you. We have one podcast on coming Saturday, and then the next one on the next Saturday.
Yeah,
And I am really thankful. I enjoyed it a lot. I learned a lot about the water challenges and its impact on our society. And hope to see you soon.
sure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It was an honor for us to host you, and looking forward for the next Saturday's talk.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.